Welcome to the Capital News. I am your host, Alex Karitis. Today is November 6th, 2019. Thank you so much for joining me. A couple stories we're going to focus on today is Ray Dalio. We mentioned this individual's name here quite a bit on the Capital News podcast. Ray Dalio is the manager of Bridgewater and Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, about $160 billion in assets under management. He is out there once again in the news giving interviews, and he recently posted another article to LinkedIn. I have yet to read the article, but I did catch one of his interviews today on CNBC where he was basically discussing the gist of the article. We have talked about a previous article that Ray Dalio posted to LinkedIn several months ago in regards to capitalism and his argument that it needs to be sort of re-engineered or reinvented. I can't remember the exact word at this moment, but we said, no, that's not correct. It just simply needs to be reinstated. That's what it needs to be. It needs to be reinstated. This country does not operate under a free market capitalistic regime, which it's supposed to. It's supposed to. It's fitting with our Constitution. It is the most prosperous system that has ever existed that we know of. It's most definitely not fascism or socialism or communism or any of those isms. It's free market capitalism. That system has elevated more people from the depths of hunger and poverty than any other system known to man. Now, what we have come to in this country, sadly, is due to the great success of free market capitalism. Human nature would have it that we become too greedy, we become complacent, we become lazy, and we start to adopt easier, lazier, simpler ways of getting things done. And it's easier to pass legislation. It's easier to take all of that wealth that we have accumulated and you say, hey, politician, I have a few extra bucks in my pocket. Would you like it? Oh, of course I would. Well, do me a favor. And so instead of being that rugged individual, it's now, here's my pocketbook. Let me write you a check. You go change some laws. So that's the system we have right now, and it's turned into, and this has been the case for the past, I'd say last 40 years or so, really heavy on, and we have data to back this up. Again, this goes back to that year 1970, and if you follow us on the Capital Economics presentations where we go through this data, we highlight the year 1970, 1971 in particular, because this is when President Richard Nixon removed us entirely from the gold standard, and this just gave the Federal Reserve basically at-will authority to print as much money as they want to, and, they were sort of tiptoeing into it, just sort of tipping their toe into the water back in the 1970s, sort of creeping up in the 80s, and then once the 90s, 2000s, and now have hit, it's the pedal to the metal. And so you're starting to see the likes of individuals like Ray Dalio coming out and saying, issuing warnings, this isn't good. He's been consistent about this. History tells us that this is not good. The wealth inequality that exists because of this money printing, because of the system that we have adopted, is going to cause economic hardship. It's going to cause political hardship, political decay, social angst, riots, protests, and in a worst-case scenario, it can cause a civil war. This is not him or I or anybody else who believes this being hyperbolic. This is not exaggeration. This is reality. This is rooted in history. This is what happens. So the question is, to what degree do the people take to the streets? What ideas do we as a nation adopt? And how do we solve these problems moving forward? Now, in this interview on CNBC with Ray Dalio, I have to give kudos to CNBC. I cannot remember her name, but she did a good job of asking some decent questions that were relevant to his article and to his argument, and she did not interrupt him. It's common practice for some reason that a lot of people on CNBC like to interrupt Ray Dalio. They let the man speak. That I appreciate. But I would like to interview Ray Dalio because I still have a little bit of a beef with Ray Dalio on some of his alleged solutions, because he wants to continue to talk about, again, what we're witnessing, central banks coming to the rescue in perpetuity, saying that capitalism to some degree has failed, that it needs to be re-engineered. But we have all of these outstanding debts. Again, at the consumer household level, at the corporate level, at the government level, and at even now the central bank level. So who's going to bail who out? Well, he's making the argument that we're going to have to continue printing money, that interest rates are going to have to remain low, or that they have to go even lower. That's the wrong solution. In fact, that's not a solution. That's more of the problem. That's insanity. And the reason he is saying this, I believe, is because he probably genuinely believes that that is the solution. That's the right way to go. He would rather try to engineer a very protracted, very prolonged kicking the can down the road scenario, as opposed to allowing market forces, the same market forces that he is saying that needs to basically be reinstated, that needs to come back to the forefront with capitalism. He's saying, no, we don't want higher interest rates. We need lower interest rates and we need more money printing. That's insanity. That's insanity. And I would love to question him. If anybody knows Ray Dalio, give him my number, tell him about the Capital News. I want to have a conversation with him. And it would be very interesting. It would be a gentleman's disagreement, but there's going to be some hard questions asked, because that is not the solution, period, end of story. You cannot tell me that easy money, which has caused all of the distortions that he has just written about and has argued eloquently about in causing, is now going to be solved by even lower interest rates for an even longer period of time. That's the definition of insanity. He wants to do this, I think, because he wants to try to mitigate the amount of economic and financial and even political hardship that this is going to cause. Now, you can say, well, that's admirable. He's trying to be sympathetic and empathetic to other people's needs. Too bad. That ain't going to solve it. The Band-Aid needs to be ripped off. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's too late. The horse left the barn. We wrote about this in our book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing in the Era of Too Big to Fail, It Pays to Be a Cynic, which, by the way, my shameless plug for the day here and going forward, we're nearing the holiday shopping season. It's a great gift for friends and family. You want to understand what's going on in this market, buy our book, The Cynic's Guide to Investing. Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, and a Kindle version is available. We truly appreciate it. But back to Mr. Dalio and company. This is nonsense. You have to allow the market to correct itself. You have to allow interest rates to go up. You have to allow them to go to whatever rate they need to be to clear and cleanse this system. We talk about the repo, the overnight market that the Federal Reserve is getting involved with on a nightly basis to the tune of $100 billion thereabouts, plus or minus a little bit. But, you know, what's $20 billion amongst friends in either direction? Who cares? I mean, who's really accounting for this to begin with? Okay? Those rates on an overnight basis are supposed to be what the federal funds rate is. About 1.5%, 1.75%, 2%. They have been skyrocketing to 8, 9, nearly 10% in some instances. That's not supposed to happen. The Federal Reserve is supposed to have complete and utter control over that rate. The market said, something's amiss here. You got to pay us 8%, you got to pay us 9%, you got to pay us 10%. That's caused the panic. It was supposed to be a one-off 2 months ago. Now it's in perpetuity. You've been lied to. I told you were being lied to. I said, we'll even give the idiots the benefit of the doubt for a couple weeks. We'll see what happens. I don't even think we made it a couple weeks before they admitted, yeah, we got to do this longer. We got to do this bigger. And now it's like, well, we're just going to throw our hands up. There's not enough liquidity out in the system, despite the fact that they've been printing it for the past 10 years. And now we have Mr. Dalio saying they got to continue to do it. If you want to continue to play this game, he's right. They do have to continue printing it, and I've said so as much as well. Look at our capital economics presentation, which was very timely. Are central banks trapped? And we looked at the balance sheet, their balance sheet, the asset side of it, and all of the money printing that they were engaged in for the past decade. And we said, look, if they're going to continue this, if they're going to engage in quantitative easing number 4, which they are in the midst of, they're going to have to put the pedal to the metal. It's going to have to be even bigger than all of the other QEs combined to get the same type of effect. Okay, so we might have that melt-up scenario. We might have a market that says we're running out of gas here. We've shot up this bull market too much. The bull's dead. He's going to OD, and look out below. Look out below, because the bears are going to devour him all the way down. Who knows what's going to happen? That's why I tell you to stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capital News. Because nobody knows. Ray Dalio doesn't know. But I'm telling you something. If you listen to that interview, and I'm sure in his article, if you read between the lines as to what he is saying, there is problems and trouble ahead. And it's in the not too distant future. He wants to continue with this money printing because he wants to kick the can further down the road and try to engineer. He wants to sort of try to get the right politicians, the right leaders in industry and in government, at the same time having the Federal Reserve continue to print money and say, okay, we're going to re-engineer everything. You guys continue to print money so these zombie companies can continue to operate. But in the background, business leaders and politicians are going to start to re-engineer the system so we can create the right incentives for all of this to get mopped up. It ain't going to get mopped up, ladies and gentlemen. That's a pie-in-the-sky theory. The only way this is ever going to get solved is, again, ripping the Band-Aid off, allowing interest rates to be whatever they're supposed to be, 8, 9, 10%, allowing all of these zombie companies to go out of business, to have asset sales at pretty much, barn sale prices, restructure, and if you can come out of the restructure, like I always say, more power to them, and if they can't, see you later, you tried. Try again somewhere else, or allow the next round of entrepreneurs to step up to the plate and take over. This is not going to happen at the drop of a hat, the flip of a switch. This will take a while, but we will be better off as a country, as a society, because of it. It will be painful. It will be extremely painful, but it's going to happen regardless. Even if these idiots take to printing money in perpetuity, it's not going to solve a damn thing. It hasn't solved a damn thing. I've always been cautious of this market and of this experiment since it began over a decade ago. There are some people who have been perma-bears during this entire time. Not me. I have not been a perma-bear. As much as I want to sort of side with my ideological self on this and say, yeah, we should have been a bear and this, that, and the other, you can't do that because you have to invest and trade in the market that exists. Okay? That's why our book, again, The Cynic's Guide to Investing, was bearish. That book, we started writing that either late 2013, early 2014, came out, published in 2015, and we were bearish then because that was the market that existed. There was still juice in this fraudulent economic experiment, this money printing. There was still juice. Now, for the past, almost a year already since we've started this podcast in January, in a few months, it'll be a year, I have switched my tune. I have started to become more cautious. I started to become a little bit more bearish, okay? Started to get more diversified with putting things into cash, having some short positions that aren't going to blow me out of the water if I'm wrong. Starting to get more heavily involved with precious metals, the things I tell you guys on a near daily basis. Stay diversified and stay vigilant. Because I believe that diminishing marginal returns are starting to kick in with the potency of printing money to kick the can further and further down the road. We started to see that at the end of last year with that massive sell-off. I thought that was going to continue. I did not foresee Donald Trump calling up the George Orwellian 1984 version of a plunge protection team, and that's what it's called, a plunge protection team, saying, hey, you got to do something about this. You got to bid up the stock market, and then tell everybody, buy the dips. Buy the dips. That's not what the President of the United States is supposed to do. That's not, it's basically a conspiracy in your face. It's a crime being concocted in your face in conjunction with Wall Street, in conjunction with the Federal Reserve. Interest rates are supposed to go up. The market is supposed to correct. Businesses that should not be standing are supposed to go by the wayside. You take the pain. You take your medicine. You learn from it, and you move on. Continuing to kick the can down the road is nobody's solution, and in fact, all it's going to do is create a further divisiveness, because it's ironic, because Ray Dalio understands, I believe, quite well the history of this and the divisiveness that this has caused and is going to continue to cause. This discrepancy, this wealth and income gap that exists globally. Again, folks, these riots and protests around the world, this is not transitory. This is history in the making. What the people in these countries around the world are protesting and rioting is very much the confluence of these economic distortions and these political distortions and corruption. Well, guess what? We have that here in the United States. Just wait until it comes here. Kicking this can further and further down the road is not going to solve a damn thing. And in fact, Ray Dalio might be engaging in self-preservation because he may be fully aware, hey, I got billions of dollars to my name. People might not like me, and they might come after me because there's history of that. So maybe he's doing this for self-preservation to some degree. But I digress on that. Understand me. Ray Dalio, others out there, myself, I see the writing on the wall. This is a problem. There is no leadership. That is something that Ray Dalio and I agree on. There is no leadership. Donald Trump isn't talking about this. Donald Trump wants more of this. He wants more of the money printing. He wants lower interest rates. Him and Ray Dalio should go have a cup of tea, play around the golf. I mean, this is ridiculous. You know, before he became president, this was the problem. One of the reasons why I voted for the guy. He might get it. He's going after the Federal Reserve. Finally, somebody going after the Federal Reserve, saying we are in a bubble, that this economy is fake, it's bloated, it's artificial. Nope, now he's president. Hey, Jerome Powell, Federal Reserve, you got to cut those interest rates, get them to zero, get them to negative territory, and get involved with quantitative easing, and the same things that caused the problem. And that's another thing that we are dealing with here in this country. It is a loss of this nation's soul. We are putting profits in GDP and economic figures, in salary, in jobs, ahead of society, ahead of this nation, ahead of principles, ahead of truth, justice, righteousness, ahead of family. And can you understand now why we are in such moral decay in this country? I mean, it makes perfect sense. We are right now in the midst of a struggle for the soul of this country. And we have a narcissist and a liar as the president of the United States, and we have lunatics running for president on the Democratic ticket. This is basically the war of socialist versus a sociopath. I mean, this is the best the United States can do. This is a true shame. So what do you think is going to be the final result once the music stops playing? It's not going to be pretty for anybody. There's no leadership. Nobody on either side talks about the debt. Nobody. It's just continue to print money. Everything will be okay. Well, who's going to pay the bill? There is, and we've had this conversation too, and this goes right to the heart of the question of morality and ethics. What is debt? But stealing future production and growth and economic activity, taking it from the future and bringing it to today, to the present. Well, how far out into the future, how many generations out into the future do we want to screw over right now? Does anybody even ask this question? Does anybody even understand that that's what's actually taking place? Do you even care? Because you talk about millennials, you want to talk about my generation being lazy, or whatever the case may be, whatever the stereotype is. Maybe we've been screwed over by a whole bunch of older generations who have continued to kick the can further and further down the road and didn't take any responsibility. They stole our growth. They stole our opportunity. How much further down the road do you want to go? Because it's not stopping with the millennials. Believe me, ladies and gentlemen, this is going further and further out. And every day we print another $60 billion, or every month we print another $60 billion. Every year we do another $1 trillion deficit. We're stealing another generation's growth. When is it going to stop? When are we going to wake up and say this ride is over? Nobody wants the party to stop. I get it. I understand it. Nobody wants a good party to end. But they all do. And the further we kick this thing down the road, the bigger the problem is going to be. The question is, how shameful is it? How shameful is it of current generations to reap the alleged benefits of this party and have everybody else pay for the hangover? It's not right. It's just not right, and there's going to be a lot of problems on many fronts facing us. And the scary thing is we're going to have a continuation of either Donald Trump for the next 4 years, or we're going to have some lunatic from the left for the next 4 years. 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. $1 trillion deficits, nothing being solved, endless wars, Social Security out of control, Medicare, Medicaid out of control, education out of control. You know, these kids can't read or write. They can't do arithmetic. We have nothing to show for it. Nobody's talking about it. There's T-shirts that say build the wall and read the transcript. That's all we can focus on? Are you kidding me? I mean, this is all we do. This is it. And what's the football score? Well, you all know what it is. I don't know what it is. I couldn't care less what these idiots make, what they're paid, and what the score is. But everybody else knows what's going on. Everybody else knows who's winning the Academy Awards, because that's what's important here. So, you know, you want to question why there's moral decay. You want to question why this country doesn't look like what it looked like 40, 50 years ago. What are you paying attention to? I mean, that's a simple question. Now, even back, you know, Read the transcript, the impeachment. We're going to talk about the impeachment, too, because that goes somewhat to the heart of our republic and where we stand and why we're going through this circus as well. So that's Ray Dalio. I'll continue to talk about that because there's disagreements there. I understand where he's coming from. He's trying to be empathetic and sympathetic to people's financial and economic concerns to some degree. And he's just saying, I think we can engineer this. No, it can't. It's too late. It's too late. Sorry, the horse is out of the barn. He ain't coming back. You just have to allow market forces, free market capitalism, to do its thing. You have to trust the system in which we are told that we adopt here in the United States. Of course, it's not. It's fascism and socialism. Look those definitions up or buy our book because we describe that at the very beginning so you understand what type of system we are operating in, and we do nothing but prove it throughout the book's entirety. So have at it. The other thing I want to talk about today is Trump's trouble, because making my way a little bit further through Ambassador Volker's transcript, there's not a whole bunch of bombshells, anything being dropped here. But we are starting to see some cracks in the foundation at the White House, because we have been told repeatedly that Donald Trump is his own war room. He doesn't have to hire a communications team to put on a front for him, a defense for him in regards to these impeachment inquiry allegations. But now we are starting to hear that they are hiring, that they, being the White House, are bringing on some people to create a communications defense for Donald Trump. So clearly there are cracks in the foundation. Donald Trump on this matter has not been his best spokesman. He's stepped in it a couple of times. He did so again today, in fact, tweeting, I believe, about Ambassador Volker's testimony, saying, see, good job, Ambassador Volker. You never heard me say quid pro quo or ask for this, that, or the other. Well, that doesn't prove that you didn't. He was just not in the room when you did. A terrible argument for him to make. Telling everybody to focus on the whistleblower, again, is distraction. We already know the facts. Do I want the whistleblower to come out and to be questioned? Yes, I do. I think that should happen. Will it happen is another question. But that's a distraction and diversion tactic that the president is very effective in deploying. So I understand that mechanism. But I believe one of the characters that he is hiring is Pam Bondi, if I remember her name correctly. She's a former attorney general from the state of Florida. And I also believe a spokesman within the Treasury Department is also going to be making his way to the White House, and they're going to come up with some sort of strategy so that the White House is on the same page. Because, look, Donald Trump has stepped in it. His press secretary, Stephanie Grisham, she's stepped in it. Mick Mulvaney, acting chief of staff, he definitely stepped in. Yeah, we do this all the time, and you're just going to have to get used to it. And then, you know, a few hours later, I didn't mean to say that. There was no quid pro quo. We don't do that stuff. Just kidding. And now you have the 4 transcripts that have released over the past 2 days basically coming out and saying, well, yeah, it's a quid pro quo. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has been out there since this thing has started. There is no quid pro quo. And now you have 4 very reputable people. If you look at their resumes and their careers within the State Department, in the U.S. government, in various offices, whether that be in the military, the State Department, other branches of the government, whatever have you, versus Donald Trump. Doesn't look good, does it? And why is that, might you ask? Interesting question, isn't it? Well, maybe, just maybe, if you've been focusing and paying attention to the Capitol News, it's about one word, isn't it? Can you remember that word? C-R-E-D, credibility. Ring on a bell? Maybe that's why I wrote a letter to the president. Yeah, we were talking about some other issues, but what was the crux of the matter? Credibility. You want to continue to lie. You want to continue to exaggerate. You want to continue to be the little boy who cries wolf. This is what you're going to get. It's now a he said versus he said, or he said versus she said. And when you got one of them who is a known and open liar to everybody and their mother, and a whole bunch of people who have a very reputable resume, who do you think the public's going to believe? And we haven't even gotten to the public hearings yet. People don't want to read this transcript. People don't want to go through 1,000 pages of documents. They don't have the time of day, and they don't have the inclination to do it, and they don't have the attention span to focus on everything and ask these questions. But guess what? Wait till you get that picture. Wait till you get that visual. Here's crazy Rudy Giuliani. Here's lying Donald Trump versus all of these people who have devoted their lives and their careers to service to this country, who do you think the public is going to believe if these people come off credible, which they're most likely going to? This is why you don't lie. This is why you come off as credible. This is why you don't make exaggerations. This is why you don't jerk people around for 2 years with a China trade deal. And don't even get me started on that, which doesn't even seem to be happening now. That's even getting pushed further out into December now, if that's even going to happen. When's it going to end? When's it going to end? And all of the, the TV teases that I talked about yesterday. I mean, he's the master of TV with The Apprentice for how many ever years it was on. Stay tuned till next week, folks. We got a big show for you. How many times have we heard from Donald Trump? All I have to do is declassify a few documents, and it's game over. It's game over. That's it. You watch, you wait, you see. It doesn't matter who he's talking to. Maybe he calls into Fox News, Fox and Friends in the morning. You wait. Big things are going to come. How many times has he called into Janine Pirro and talked about, listen, Judge, just wait. There's some big things coming. They're going to be dropping. Just wait. How many times will we see on Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham? Same damn story. Let me ask you guys a question. If that's all he has to do, if he has everybody dead to rights, and all he has to do is declassify a couple documents, this divisiveness can stop, or it can definitely come to a simmer and not a boil, and he can start allowing the truth to be known to everybody, then why would he have to ask an incoming, inexperienced politician, President Zelensky of Ukraine, who was also a TV host, some sort of comedian, if I understand it correctly over there, who has no experience in this realm, why would he ask an incoming president of Ukraine to investigate his political rival? If all you have to do is declassify a few documents and everybody's dead to rights in the Obama administration, this deep state conspiracy that's being concocted and all this other stuff, then why would you have to ask the president of Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden and his son? It makes no sense whatsoever. None whatsoever. So the only logical thing is you've been jerked around again. We've been lied to. Now, is it possible that there is a deep state conspiracy? I believe to an extent with the Russian collusion, which we talked about extensively at the beginning of this year, there's some fishy business going on there. The Obama administration, NSA, CIA, FBI, there's some funny business going on around there. That needs to be investigated. It is being investigated. And I do believe people need to be brought to justice on that. And I do believe there is some funny business. But again, that doesn't mean that if the Democrats and the Obama administration were guilty, that doesn't exonerate Donald Trump and other Republicans. They can be guilty, and so can Donald Trump. And I'm telling you, while there has yet to be any real major bombshell other than the fact that there is a quid pro quo, he did ask a foreign leader to investigate a political rival. There's nothing that's really, oh, we got him so far. There's nothing. But it's not stacking up well because that has been the president's argument. There was no quid pro quo. There was. We have 4 or 5 individuals. We got their transcripts. They're all stating it. They're all stating it. What gives Donald Trump a little bit of cover at this juncture is that none of them have heard from Donald Trump's mouth that he wanted that type of action. It was all secondhand. Well, who was the second hand? You guessed it, Rudy Giuliani. So instead of getting the information from the horse's mouth, you get it from the horse's ass, Rudy Giuliani. And he's out there and he's blah, blah, blahing about God knows what, globetrotting all over the world for God knows what. And everybody's wondering, why is he doing this? We've never seen anything like this. We're 30, 40 years experience in the State Department. We've never seen a personal attorney for the president. Not a member of the State Department, not a member of the U.S. government. A private citizen who happens to be the president's personal attorney, going all over the place, and he is acting as a middleman between President Trump, Ukraine, the State Department, and the National Security Council. We haven't seen that. That to me raises eyebrows, because that to me is highly reminiscent of Hillary Clinton operating with her lackeys. And if anything should hit the fan, and we're going to be questioned by the FBI or anybody else, in some instances, if the question's difficult, you're going to say it's attorney-client privilege. And if it's something easy, if it's a softball question, you can just say you were my chief of staff, you were my advisor, etc., etc. That looks like to be the same thing here, because Nobody so far has heard Donald Trump give the order saying, look, in order for Ukraine to get X, Y, and Z, I have to have Ukraine make a public statement that they are investigating 2016 election interference, that they are investigating CrowdStrike with the server nonsense, and that they are investigating Burisma Holdings and Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. That's all come from Rudy Giuliani. But then you say, well, who's Rudy Giuliani working for? Donald Trump. So you're supposed to use common sense. They tell you this if you're in the court of law, if you're sitting as a juror. You do not throw common sense out the window. Well, if this guy's working, Rudy Giuliani, on behalf of Donald Trump, and he's saying this has to happen, and you know that Donald Trump is very controlling and wants to know what's going on and wants to have a say on everything, isn't it rational to believe that Donald Trump either gave this order to Rudy Giuliani, that that's what he wanted, or maybe Rudy Giuliani came up with the idea, but Donald Trump would have had to have signed off on it? So this does not look good for the president. And again, if he has these documents that he can declassify, why is he asking a foreign country to investigate his political rival? And you know my statement on that if you follow this podcast. Because if Donald Trump asked the previous administration in Ukraine to investigate this 3 years ago, 2 years ago, this wouldn't be an issue, or it wouldn't be as big as an issue as it is right now. It looks completely about politics, not about policy. And that is problematic. And that's why I say it needs to be investigated, because nobody is above the law, and you cannot have a president abusing his powers. You just can't have it. I'm down the middle here. Go after Obama. Go after Bush. Go after Clinton. Go after Trump too. Nobody's above the law. That's what we got to get around to. So saving capitalism in Trump trouble, this is going to continue. These are themes that we talk about here all the time on the Capitol News. They're not going away. We're going to have public hearings taking place next week. And again, that's going to be a very interesting visual, because people will pay attention to that. They're not going to read these transcripts, but they will watch somebody testify in front of Congress. Now, the question is, are all of the members of these committees going to be able to ask questions, or is it going to be more like these transcripts where it's a few questions by actual members and more heavily focused towards the legal counsel of the majority and the minority parties of these committees? That'll be interesting. If it's most of the congressmen, it'll be more of a circus, just because that's where we are today in today's world. If it's these attorneys, then it'll probably have a feeling that it's more professional. I hope it goes that route. But I do hope that if congressmen and women do have legitimate questions to ask that aren't going to be a spectacle, that aren't going to turn it into a circus, if they have legit questions, then I hope they are allowed to ask them, because we, the American people, deserve to know the truth, the whole truth. Stay diversified, stay vigilant, and stay with the Capitol News. Please like, share, subscribe, get the word out. Leave your comments. We do love hearing from you. This is the Capitol News. I am Alex Koritis. Godspeed.